Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, new reports about Hamas in Gaza with videos showing how Hamas has been torturing Palestinian civilians, as new reports show many Palestinians turning against the terrorist group. All of this and President-elect Donald Trump and President Biden promising to help get the hostages free. Trump and Biden holding a friendly meeting at the White House as Trump once again announces a surprising cabinet choice, shocking members of both parties in Washington. The president-elect may face a roadblock getting his nominees confirmed, as the government bureaucracy could try to slow them down. And why someone known as the Miracle Man is anonymously giving away cash all across his state. All those stories and more ahead today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Let's begin a busy Thursday with the war in the Middle East, as President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump agreed to work together to free the remaining hostages in Gaza. Their discussion raised hopes for the families whose loved ones are still in captivity. A new report says some Palestinians in Gaza are turning against Hamas, and footage has been released of Hamas torturing Palestinian civilians. Chris Mitchell brings us the story now from Jerusalem. We do want to warn you, some of the video in this story is disturbing.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, paraphrasing President Biden, said he's ready to do everything in our collective American power to secure the release of the hostages. Yet not all the hostages in Gaza are held by Hamas. Palestinian Islamic Jihad released a propaganda video of their hostage, Sasha Trufano. Trufano's mother viewed the video with mixed emotions.
On the one hand, I am very happy to see him alive and see him talking. And on the other hand, I see that he is not in a good mental or physical state.
Inside Gaza, Israeli forces released hundreds of hours of closed-circuit television footage. The IDF said the materials expose how Hamas brutally tortured Palestinian civilians suspected of opposing its rule. Some were hung upside down, others tied up in agonizing positions, or tortured while their captors sat inches away, talking to themselves or completing paperwork. Israeli media details the anger many Gazans feel towards Hamas. An Israeli Channel 12 reporter got exclusive access into Gaza and heard this unfiltered view from a number of its citizens.
بيقتلونا إرهابية حماس إرهابية قول يلا معاي حماس إرهابية حماس إرهابية الله ينتقم منك يا سنوار الله يشحنك يا رب أبرق.
The video showed IDF soldiers providing water and medical aid.
بدهم يساعدوك اوكي تخافيش يا خال تخافيش الله يقطع حماس واليوم اللي شفناهم فيه ذبحوهم ذبحوا حماس وقتلوهم وين ما رحتوا شفتوهم ذبحوهم ينعوا ابوهم ما بدناش اياهم يحلوا عنا.
A number of men on crutches explains how they were wounded.
كل هدول المشلولين اللي بشوف كلهم من حماس حاول افهم شيء إسرائيل يعني بتسمح لهدول الشاحنات يفوتوا على الشمر غزة بس يسرقوها حماس بيسرقوها
أظن ميت من الجوع أحسن
أمام عيونكم سرقوها
أظن قدام عيني قدام عيني
إذا تكلمت بطخوك وين بخلطك بخطيك الشاهان وين بطخ شحان على اللحم بطخ عشان يشلك.
Many said they favored Israel.
ندوا حماس عن الوجود احنا معكم
انتوا معنا يعني انتوا مع إسرائيل
خيرنا منكم احنا جوز ما يشدخل عندكم انتوا الخير عندكم انتوا البركه ها
The report also noted hundreds of Hamas terrorists have been surrendering, a sign of how much the IDF has weakened the terror group.
Chris Mitchell joins us now to continue our coverage from Jerusalem. So, Chris, this Channel 12 report brought out some very important information. What else did you see in it?
Well, it is pretty disturbing to watch that and the terror, the torture video from the people speaking freely. I think that's one of the main things. Hamas has ruled Gaza with a rod of iron for many, many years, since 2007. If you speak out against them, as these people said, you'll be killed. They're wanting revenge on Hamas, and Sinwar, the leader of Hamas for many years, Also, what I was struck by was the compassion of the IDF providing water and medical aid to many of these people. It's really not the picture that much of the world sees or knows about. Also, the misery of the people, but the blame from these people was putting on Hamas. Also, the noting that Hamas takes much of the aid. It's been reported before, but to hear it from the Gazans themselves really carries a lot of weight, especially when they're shot because they take some of the aid. But Hamas goes ahead and steals it. Much of the world has really been putting, and the White House has been putting the pressure on Israel, but less so on Hamas, it sees. One woman talked about peace and coexistence, and it brings up the idea of what's next. When the war is over, the day after, what will happen to Gaza? It still remains to be seen.
What's been the response in Israel to this video of Hamas torturing Palestinians?
I think like anyone else seeing it, it's really hard to watch. Disgusted, shocked, outraged. It's been well known in Gaza that Hamas tortures many of its own citizens. The IDF Gazan commander, when commenting about this video, said it highlights the difference between the IDF and Hamas. Even some Muslim commentators condemned it, that Hamas's actions were really crimes against humanity. Many Israelis argue, even though it's very disturbing, that it should be shown to expose the brutality of Hamas. It is very disturbing to watch what these people went through, what they had to go through. Now, just to note, this video was back in 2018 to 2020, but it really does show exactly how Hamas ruled over the Gaza Strip so those many years.
Israel has been battling and fighting Hamas for more than a year now with repeated attacks. How weak is Hamas right now?
Well, according to a report from the IDSF, that's the Israel Defense Security Forum, that Hamas has lost most of its military capacity. At the beginning of the war, the fighting was systemic, meaning it moved street by street in order to eliminate the terrorists and to destroy the infrastructure. The many tunnels inside Gaza, maybe as many as 400 miles of tunnels. Today, however, most of the fighting is carried out in pinpoint excursions and precision attacks. And much of the fighting is focusing on the Hamas leadership and to prevent Hamas itself from regaining strength. But as you see in that video, many of the Hamas terrorists have been surrendering and even further weakening the terror group after more than a year of fighting.
Chris, let's turn now to an arrest in Israel of someone who leaked classified documents about Israel's preparations for its attacks on Iran. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we know that the FBI arrested CIA official Asif William Rahman. He was arrested in Cambodia. He was charged with leaking classified documents about Israel's plans to retaliate for an Iranian missile attack on Israel. You remember that attack took place on October 1st. Iran fired 181 ballistic missiles against Israel, and then Israel was preparing to counterattack against Iran. Rahman works for the CIA, reportedly holds a top secret clearance. And what he did, those documents showed how Israel was preparing for the attack that eventually did come on October 26th. They were moving advanced munitions. The Israeli Air Force was performing exercises. And so that's the context. But finally, this is where the arrest of the FBI there in Thailand.
Speaking of Iran, you reported yesterday Prime Minister Netanyahu sent a message to Iran talking about how Iran could have peace if it gets rid of the Islamic regime. What have you learned about the opposition groups in Iran?
Well, Ephraim, many people may think Iran is just one people group, but really only half of Iranians speak Persian or Farsi. And imagine many people outside of Iran may not have heard many of the ethnic groups, Azeris, Kurds, Balochis, Azawis. They're all fighting for their independence in Iran. And many people call them true freedom fighters. They want freedom from the Ayatollahs, and they're looking for help from the West. We've talked to Yigal Karman. He's the head of memory, and he's been contacting many of these people. He says they have a dream of freedom. And also Netanyahu spoke directly to the Iranian people, trying to turn that dream into a reality.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much, Chris, for your insights. Stay safe and know that we continue to pray for you and our team there on the ground in Israel. Coming up, President-elect Donald Trump back at the White House meeting with President Joe Biden and stunning Washington with yet another surprising pick for a major cabinet position. We're going to bring you that story when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Multiple news organizations are now projecting the Republicans will maintain their control of the House of Representatives, adding to their victories in the race for the White House and the Senate. And President-elect Trump has announced more key choices for his cabinet, with those picks showing how he plans to govern in his second term. The president-elect meeting with Republicans on Capitol Hill and with President Biden for a cordial fireside chat. CBN's Lori Johnson is on this story.
President Trump triumphantly returned to Washington, D.C. to meet with congressional Republicans and attend a face-to-face with President Biden at the White House.
Donald, congratulations. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need.
The meeting appeared civil, even friendly.
Thank you very much. And politics is tough. And it's, in many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
After this photo op, the two met behind closed doors for nearly 2 hours.
It was a substantive meeting, an exchange of views. They discussed important national security and domestic policy issues facing the nation and the world.
This is the comeback king. He is the king.
The GOP now winning control of the House, reaching the magic number of 218 seats. House Republicans voted to return Speaker Mike Johnson to his position, a move endorsed by the president-elect, who received a standing ovation from the lawmakers.
It's just a very nice gathering. Isn't it nice to win? It's nice to win. It's always nice to win.
In the upper chamber, Senate Republicans selected South Dakota's John Thune for Majority Leader.
And this Republican team is united. We are on one team. We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda.
The president-elect rolled out more cabinet picks, choosing Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Gaetz, who's been under investigation by the House Ethics Committee over allegations of sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, immediately resigned his seat, shutting down the investigation.
If Matt has resigned and is no longer a member of Congress, the investigation will cease and no report will be issued.
We have too many people in our government who don't care about the people.
Former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard was tapped as Director of National Intelligence, while Florida Senator Marco Rubio officially nominated as Secretary of State. The president-elect hopes the Senate will fast-track his nominees by the time he takes office January 20th. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Still ahead, a political analyst tells CBN News how President-elect Trump's nominations could be slowed down by the federal bureaucracy. We're going to hear from him. We got the story for you. He's coming up right after this. As President-elect Donald Trump moves quickly to appoint members of his incoming administration, some confirmations may be slowed down by members of the government bureaucracy. On this week's episode of The Global Lane, Lexington Institute senior fellow Paul Steidler says although Trump wants to move quickly, he is likely to run into resistance from what many people call the deep state.
At the Lexington Institute, Gary, we've looked at the presidential appointments process here. And that process for several decades in Washington has been broken. Left unchecked, President Trump is going to have to wait 6 months to a year to have many of his key appointees confirmed by the U.S. Senate to important positions. This is a trend that's been going on for about 40 years. And it's very important at this point that the president-elect be aware of this, which he certainly seems to be, move very expeditiously on appointments, which he's taken the first steps here. And once those appointments are named and once they're given to the Senate, those appointments should be voted on within a 30-day period. That's an eminently reasonable period of time for a hiring decision to be made. And it's also in the nation's best interest to have that done. These people are going to play extremely important roles in the government. They're going to be responsible for overseeing trillions of dollars in spending. They're going to be responsible for overseeing the 4.4 million federal civilian and military employees in the federal government. And those are people who will have been selected by President Trump, and they can make the rest of the bureaucracy work as it should and call out bad actors who are in there. So without those actions, those bad actors are going to have more leeway.
Well, you lay out 3 steps that the Trump team needs to take during the transition. First, you say he must immediately prepare and vet administration nominees now. Don't wait until January. What do you think so far, his efforts 1 week after the election?
Well, so far, so good. The president, for example, recently named, or 2 days ago, named Gail Slater, a woman who works for Senator J.D. Vance, to head up the transition at the Federal Trade Commission. That's an area that's become highly politicized. She's very well respected by both Democrats and Republicans. And So that, as an example, is a very good move. In general, the president has moved much more quickly than 8 years ago when he was elected. As you may recall, 8 years ago, there was drama with Chris Christie heading up the transition and him getting fired. There was infighting between some Republican National Committee operatives and the Trump team. He doesn't have those distractions right now, so he can move forward very quickly and expeditiously. He also has experience of being in the government and knowing the important roles of these different people, be it at the FTC, the Department of Justice, you name it, as far as departments go.
Yeah, nothing like experience to learn from. Now, you say he must prioritize key positions, so which ones should he focus on initially? Which ones, in your opinion, are the most crucial?
Well, some of them are obvious, the Department of State, Department of Defense, and CIA heads. But we also think it's very important that he take a look at the people who are overseeing business issues in the Department of Commerce, at the Federal Trade Commission, and at the Department of Justice, especially in its antitrust division. These are supposed to be nonpartisan entities that are focused on making the American economy function optimally. At the FTC, for example, which its basic business is to adjudicate legal matters, its chair became the activist and the point person for saying that the reason grocery prices had gone up is somehow grocery executives decided to price gouge everybody starting in February of 2021. So that has to be cleaned up. It has to be cleaned up quickly. And it certainly looks from the actions this weekend that the president is aware of that. He seems very tuned in on transition issues. And we would, urge him to prioritize those appointments, especially at defense, especially at entities like the Federal Trade Commission, and to continue what he's doing and to really accelerate that process.
Okay, we'll see if the president-elect takes your advice, Paul. Paul Steidler, senior fellow at the Lexington Institute, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
It was great to be with you, Gary.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, a former CIA whistleblower says Donald Trump's life is in grave danger. Can the Secret Service be trusted to protect him is the question he's asking. And what's Trump's proposed tax policy and deregulations, what they could mean for consumers? We'll take a look at that as well. You can see it all on The Global Lane this evening on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or watch on YouTube. Coming up, he is giving away cash across his state anonymously. We're going to tell you why. He's called the Miracle Man. We've got that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN News Watch. Finally today, an anonymous Colorado man is giving away thousands of dollars in cash all over the state. He is known as the Miracle Man as he's earned more than 100,000 followers on social media. Each day, he chooses a different part of town to hide a stash of cash, then posts a clip on Instagram showing a recognizable location for people to find. That's not the only reason he's called the Miracle Man. In 2013, he had a fatal heart attack and was pronounced dead for 15 minutes before waking up. Now he is on a mission to honor what he calls his second life. Beautiful. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, I thank you for the gift of peace. You give it to me in the middle of every storm, and I trust you. With that prayer of thanksgiving, I hope you'll join me in making this a Thursday filled with thanksgiving. Be grateful. An attitude of gratitude goes a long way. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment, let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also join us right back here tomorrow. We look forward to seeing you. Goodbye and God bless.